Alright everybody, I'm going to be going quick for the starting bit, but this is basically another episode on the project. For YouTube, this will be the second one, the third one will be out soon. So we are doing multiplication again. Of course this was on Insta, but I went into more basic standpoint with the two methods, column and then grid. One of them teachers recommend, the other one I personally would recommend. Of course, if you're not the best mathematician in the world, of course I'm not. Anyway, let's go and start with two definitions, which are your even numbers and your odd numbers. They are the opposite to each other. They contrast, basically. So an even number is a number in 2 times table. Odd numbers don't, of course. But then no even numbers are primes, and then of course odd numbers are primes. The only main number that's not a prime, which is the most confusing actually, is odd numbers. Now, put my teeth back in actually, sorry about that. It's actually just one. One's only got one factor. Of course, a prime number is a number that goes into one itself. Of course, if you notice here, just at the bottom here, if I do 1 times 6, 2 times 4, 1 times 10, this will mean that they are not prime, mainly because you can easily double that to be 2 times 3. That can be 1 time, that can also be 1 times 8, and that can be 2 times 5, of course. So yeah. Let's now go to what I'm actually going to be mainly focusing on. Of course, you should know the two definitions. I would recommend write it down so you can just be familiar with these main two definitions within this, or else you're not going to get any of it. Because always just revert back to us where I do the definitions and read what I put. Hopefully you should be able to read my handwriting. Hopefully you can. If you can't, then just leave it in the comments down below if you can, and then I'll go over it of course. Anyway, let me go to the more bottom stage, which is just these parts, which is my certain times tables, which I think is the hardest ones. Now, of course, this is one of the most debatable subjects, of course. Of course, people may say that the 11's the hardest, 6's are the hardest, 3's are the hardest, etc. But for me, it's 7, 8's and 9's for me. And you need to know your times table from 1 to 12. So let me explain. So you need to know, I'm going to write it just down here. You need to know what 1 times 12 is, 2 times 12, 3 times 12, 4 times 12, 5 times 12, 6 times 12, 7 times 12, or 8 times 12, 9 times 12, 10 times 12, 11 times 12, and then 12 times 12. You need to know all of these. And as well, and you need to know all the times tables for at least 12 times, so you etc, but I'm gonna go over the easiest one in my opinion, which would correlate to your 9's to be the third hardest in my opinion. Here is why. I'm gonna use a certain formula, which is 10 minus 1. Of course, 10 minus 1 equals 9, but this will be confusing if you don't do it incorrectly. You need to take what your times 10 by your numbers. So I'm going to use my example here, which is 30. Take away 3, and then I'm going to explain why 30 take away 1 is incorrect. Of course, we know the third term is going to be 27. But let me go over the mistakes that people may make, which is perfectly fine if you do it first, but make sure you don't continue with it. If you mess up at the same bits, you will know where you're going wrong. Mainly because it's one of the things if you do an error, you learn from it. You learn something better if you do an error within maths, as well as any other subject. If you do something wrong, then build on it and further develop it. But anyway, gloating about that. Anyway, so I'm going to explain why 30 take away 1 equals 29 is not in the 9 times table, because I'm referring to the number 29 here. This is going to be my subject number. Now, you may hear me saying some random other terms, but they're basically what I classify. So what I will tend to do, of course, if you stick around with the entire project, you'll know this. I will use my own terms, like subject number, main number, but your dividing number from last time, like the number of division from last time. Anyway, so please don't get this confusing, but I would recommend thinking of it in a way you people would think about it, but make it a simple way, or else you will get confused with other certain subjects, of course. I think my terminology is okay, but it's not the best. It's absolutely not the best, but try and make something that you will know. But actually put in the actual term in a test paper, or else you will not get the marks. Of course, do not put any of my terminology in there. I will not recommend it at all. Just think of it in your head, because your brain's the main place where it really goes into. Anyway, let me explain. Now, as pardon me from now gloating, I do apologise. Anyway, with 30 take away 1 being 29, 29's actually prime. So, in case you didn't realise, the prime number, there it is, to the viewers. Bear with me. There you go. Yeah, it only has 2 factors. Of course, that will be 29 times 1. Of course, 29 times 1, but this will be incorrect, and you will not get the correct mark. But this is the main way you would do it. Of course, for every 10 is to 1. Of course, I'm going to put that in a small ratio. So, every 10 goes to 1. Every 10 goes into 1. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it's just 10 to 1. To 1 because you get imagine getting you get every 50 sweets, you have to give away 5 of them from basically. But yeah, put that in the ratio of 10 to 1. Personally, of course, if you want, what I'd recommend doing is do it flipped, so you can get the correct term. So the 10 will go with the 10, and the 3 will go to where the 1 is, of course. If we're doing this, it should be 30 to 3. Of course, then simplify that down to 10 to 1. So going by this certain ratio, you have to do your current number, but which will be the 3 times 10, which is of course 30. Take away 3 because that's my term number. But now I'm going to use another definition, which is term number. Now this is basically like 8, 16, etc. If we talk about the 8 times tables, of course, which is of course the additional term. Of course, if I'm being completely gibberish, just try and calculate it in your head. But yeah, I would recommend doing 30 take away. So your 10 time number, so that your terminology number take times 10 from it, if that makes any sense. I'll explain what I mean right now. So for example, I want to find the 8th term. Of course, the 8 will be my TM, and that's my term number. But then, so I'll have to do 8 times 10, since every 10 is to 1. Just remember this one main thing, you have to be 10 to 1. If you're not 10 to 1 regarding this, you are pretty much fucked. Literally, every 10 numbers go into 1. It's basically, imagine combining it and get into another number. Then make it a completely new one. Every 10 goes into 1, basically. So, for example, in this, it will be 80 to 8. Simplify that down to 10 to 1, of course, which is a massive pain if you get this incorrect. But of course, I know the 8th term is 72. It's just as simple as that, and of course that means it'll be 81 to 90. So do not panic if you will get this wrong on the first time. It is perfectly normal, it's natural. Anyway, so to work out, you need to do every 10 numbers to one number. But basically, right, let me go to the second hardest, which is your 8s. Now your 8s is just do 4 times. So for example, you want to do 4 times 3, 12, times your 12 by the 2. Basically because 4 is divided by, well no, 8 divided by 2 is 4. Of course, sorry about this, people, I am messing up. It is around almost 5:15 in the morning, and yet my voice is dry, but we do move. Anyway, so with this now thinking of course I mentioned it here, which is 8 divided by 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, of course times that by 2, which is then 16, that will be your second term, second term there. And this will be the same for your third term, which will be 12 times 2, that's 24, third term, etc. Which is what we got to do is times your term number by 4, and then double your answer by 2. Of course, double means 2. You're doubling the number up, you times it by 2. Right, let me go to the hardest one now, which is 7s. There's practically no formula for this, in my opinion, unless you guys can find one, but I know I can't. Basically, if you want to do 5 plus 2 times that by 2, it will not work. Lots of things won't work for this. The only thing I recommend is just adding 7 continuously, but I wouldn't recommend it personally, for one main reason. It's just going to take forever. I'd think about it in my head more, but if we're talking about every times tables, the easiest ones are your singles, which is basically just one. I'm going to use some terminology here. My single number, which is 1, double, triple, quad. Number, which is basically double means 2, triple means 3, quad means 4, but then 5 there's no term to it, so as far as I'm aware of. So with us thinking about it, then going into prime numbers, you may notice that all these numbers, all these times, they will actually contain prime numbers in some 8s and 9s. Well, they will. They're contended for it technically, but it's actually incorrect. They are odd numbers. Not every odd number is actually a prime number. Of course, if they're in a certain times table, then they are not prime. Of course, they can be contended for it, technically speaking. They are contended, because that's the one that you're mostly going to get into, because you may think that 63 is a prime number, which is a classic mistake, suspecting numbers of being in it, then not realising, which is perfectly okay, actually. So, let me go back to my triples exception. Now, I would say this: if you don't know your basic times tables, then you are basically finished. Let me explain. The basic times tables are this: your 1s, your 2s, your 5s, and your 10s. For me, they're the most basic ones you need to know. Mainly because this 5s end in a 5 or 0. These just end in zeros, and then you need to know what the double number is, and then of course the single number. Of course, 1 times 7 will be 7, etc. You need to learn these. Believe me, if you cannot do your 5s, if you can't do your 2s, you don't know how to double. Of course, doubling will relate to another standpoint. Basically, one easy way of thinking about it is just adding the 2 numbers together, which is basically just like 3 times 2. It's 2, which is of course 6, but then do 3 plus 3, which equals 6 as well. Anyway,